Well, boils and ghouls, it's your old pal, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Welcome back to Horror Heals. This is Kendall Austin Stultz. I am one of your co-hosts, and my partner is sitting next to me.
I'm Corey Stultz, and we are so jacked about this episode. Now, for those of you who are tuning in on Friday, September 13th, which is the day that the podcast launched, you will see that this is our fourth episode we're releasing. A little bit of a surprise, but how could we launch a podcast on Friday the 13th and not have a fantastic Friday the 13th guest? And are just blown away how wonderful our new friend, Adrienne King, who you will know as Alice, the final person in the original Friday the 13th, has been. We bonded with her immediately. And as you listen to the episode, or at least the first part of this episode, we're splitting it into two because we just couldn't let Adrienne go. We had to keep going on about all the fantastic stuff and her amazing stories and her bravery and talking about her experiences with having a stalker and the PTSD that came along with that. Like, woo, she really lays it all out there. Adrienne, welcome to the show.
It is fun to be here. You guys were fabulous.
Thank you. We're so thrilled because the Friday the 13th family has been so important to our journey, not just for this podcast, but our other podcast we've been doing for a couple of years now called Family Twist, which brought us from California to New England because we met Kendall's birth family through a DNA test while we were in California. And
how incredible is that?
It's a really cool story. It's a really cool story.
Yeah.
In fact, today's the 25th. So 2 days ago is the anniversary, and it was 7 years since I found my biological family. I knew nothing about my birth except that I was adopted by my parents when I was 2 months old. It was a private adoption.
Was it in New England then?
I was born in Arkansas and never knew I had any ties to New England. When I found my biological family, that I was conceived here. My mother and father were 15 and 16 when I was conceived. My mother's family moved to Arkansas. That's where she had me, and I was adopted to a family in Arkansas. When I found my half-brother, who'd been looking for me since 1988, my dad and two of my dad's other three children live in New England. We came out to visit, and I found them in August of 2017. We came to visit in October, and on the plane ride back home to San Francisco, Corey looks over at me and says, "We're moving there." Like, it was an epiphany, and it was surreal.
Immediately felt the connection.
Definitely with my father's side.
I'd known there was always this hole in Kendall's heart that we needed to fill because of there was just this mystery. There was a puzzle piece missing. And I just thought, surely there's got to be others out there. And we were right. One of the first things that Kendall and I bonded over when we started dating was a mutual love of horror movies. And I think we've always felt a little bit like outsiders, you know, as gay people, and horror movies have always been solace to us. So then fast forward to that first visit, meeting his birth family here on the East Coast. Guess what was also happening that weekend? A horror convention.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'd had a conversation with his sister on his father's side as well. She revealed to us that she's a huge horror fan, named her son Gage after Pet Sematary.
Mm-hmm.
And so
a
couple of conversations with him. Here I am at a horror con in Sacramento, and CJ Graham is there. And I quickly, because we're so excited, I'm telling the story to everybody. I gave him the minute-long version of Finding Kendall's Family, and it's so fun that his half-sister is a huge horror fan. He's like, give me your phone. Calls her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is one of those cons where I think it was the Friday night version, so it's like 10 o'clock there, which means it's like 1 o'clock in the morning here.
Right.
She didn't answer, but he left her this amazing voicemail.
She didn't answer. She's got it for forever now, right?
Signed a hockey mask for them. It was beautiful.
Friday the 13th family is amazing.
Here we are in Worcester, Mass. In October
Worcester Rock and Shock.
Exactly.
Yeah, Gina. I love Gina.
Cool con. Had never heard of it, because we hadn't traveled much to the East Coast, but it's like,
right.
When in Rome.
Yep.
I'm not going to miss a horror con. We took
no.
Kendall's brother and sister and 2 of the nephews came along, were nice enough to indulge us, and got to share the story with Amy Steele. She was so sweet about it. With John Carl Buechler, while he was still with us. Then the whole family met Kane. And we've got a group photo with him. Mm. We just consider Kane part of the family at this point because he was there at the very beginning of this reunion. Each time I've seen him, he remembers the story. He remembers who I am and the whole situation. And such a good heart.
Great guy. Truly the best people in the horror genre.
Yeah.
Because all of us, I think, relate to being underdogs or having gone through some kind of trauma in our life. And I think we bond on that with each other. So many of my fans have become very good friends. It's not, I'm on this side of the table, you're on that side of the table. To me, we listen and we share and we feel. I give what I get. And it's always beautiful. I never meet anyone who comes up to the table with bad energy,
Right. Yeah. Right.
So it's all about us healing each other almost.
It was kismet meeting you for the first time because I was in some flashy blue. You were in some flashy blue. We totally matched. You made for a great photo. I gave you the 30-second version of Kendall's story. You were so sweet. And it was just, I just knew you would.
Great story. And I relate to it so specifically when you said healing that little part of your heart that you think you're fine and you've gone through whatever therapy you've gone through to get through it. And you have a partner who understands and gives you the love you need. But it's not until you actually find what it is that you don't even know you're missing and you feel that beautiful puzzle piece right there. And that happened to me in 2004. My first convention was a chiller convention. It was January. My first one, I didn't even have 8x10s. So the fans were lined up. It was January outside. And everybody was like, where have you been for the past 20 odd years? Without social media, how would one know that I was hiding from a stalker? How would anyone know I went into voiceovers and looping instead of on camera because I still had anxiety about going on camera? I shared just a tiny bit of that story that day on stage for the first time. There were hundreds packed into that room, and Betsy Palmer was there, and so was Amy. You could have heard a pin drop. I heard sobbing. And at that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. That little puzzle piece you were talking about, I felt it. I felt my heart happy. It was because I realized that everything I'd gone through maybe was for a reason. And maybe the empathy I was able to garner through my experience, I could possibly share with everyone out there who, like me, had gone through some trauma or had survived something. No one goes through this lifetime without some kind of trauma. No one gets through life unscathed. And I think it's a matter of how you get back to your whole self. That is the key, allowing yourself to heal. And finding, you're maybe not realizing where it's coming from, that you're going to find that wholeness back in your life again. I think we all go through it. And that's why when you were talking about your experience and feeling that, I know exactly what you were talking about because it's happened to me. And I think your listeners probably understand that same feeling because I felt like an underdog too after that. Women were treated like scum, like absolute dirt. Back when I had a stalker, the authorities said to me, "You did a movie like Friday the 13th. What do you expect?" Yeah. And the critics gave out Betsy Palmer's address and, to write hate mail. I mean, what kind of crazy world were we living in? I mean, at least we've moved forward with stalking laws.
Well, and that's the thing. Like back then, there weren't horror conventions. Back in the early days of slasher films, Friday the 13th,
No,
and
horror was not considered normal. We're outcasts.
right,
That's why we all bonded and are still bonded, I think.
exactly. And I love that you shared that because you're talking about going back 20 years, and there's this mutual healing through horror now, healing for you, and then healing for the fans. You're share your story, sharing with them, and even before that, I'm sure there's countless times you've heard, "Oh my goodness, Alice saved my life."
Yes, I've heard the most incredibly poignant stories. A woman, when I went up to the camp, shared with me she was in the military in Yemen, and honest to God, in a closet with other people, and all she could do is think of Alice in the pantry. And she said, if she can make it, I can make it. And Alice has always been a touchstone. I mean, that's just one of the stories that I've heard from people that brought me to my knees sobbing, and hugs. You feel that energy between each other that, oh my God, if I can make it, anyone can make it, or at least if I can make it, because there were nights when I didn't really care if I made it, and I know a lot of people go through that because you feel like the world is against you and why bother? Not having a support group, not having an entourage and no one believing. And, it's like you start going into this, am I the crazy one? And wondering, how am I going to get out of this? And it took me a long time and a lot of therapy, but now it makes sense to me because I really, full circle, I have touched so many lives the way Alice is a touchstone. I've become a touchstone, and I am so incredibly happy at this juncture of my life. The Emily Dickinson poem, if I can stop one heartbreaking from breaking or ease one pain, I have not lived in vain. And that's always been one of my favorite poems growing up. And I feel like I'm actually living it now. And that's why I like to go to conventions. I don't like traveling anymore at all, but that knowledge and that beautiful sharing of energy that says it's okay, you're going to get through this. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying hang in there. And if you have a support system, God bless. But if you don't, I'm your support system. Talk to me. I can say I've really been able to ease some pains.
That's what it's all about, this conversation. I really hadn't thought about the fact that something I connect with my adoptive parents over was horror. They were both horror fans. They introduced it maybe earlier than they should have for me. No judgments. And I've never been scared, like you would assume a child would be scared, because they explained it well. Like, this is make believe and this is
I
fun.
think it's not the worst idea in the world to let your kids see that the bullies on the big screen, that we can take care of them.
It's funny because I've never really bonded with my birth family, the family that I found 7 years ago. I've never really bonded with them over horror, but it brings back so many positive memories of my first parents.
Well, how blessed are you that you have two families,
Yeah, I lost my adoptive parents really young. I was 10 and 16 when they passed. I lost my dad in 87, and 30 years later in 2017 is when I found the biological family. So I'm an optimist by nature, and People always are empathetic with me about, oh, you lost your parents so young. But when you live through it, things happen. I did grow up quicker than I wanted to, but I adjusted well.
That
Absolutely.
that you could trust your own instincts.
Absolutely.
Parents to be
Yep.
able to give you the equipment you need to carry on.
Absolutely.
Well, an important part of our relationship since the beginning was Kendall just sharing with me who his adoptive parents were. Like I never got to meet them, but I feel like I know them and we talk about them
Every day.
Have
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
They really were just wonderful people. And with the other podcast, we talked to so many adoptees who did not have great experiences in their adoptive family. So I know how fortunate I was. And yes, I lost them young, but to your point, they built the foundation that I've always relied on.
Well, that's indeed a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Adrienne, I'm sure there was some trepidation going into that first Chiller convention, just, based on the stalker experiences and all that. And as I'm sure you found, maybe not with that first convention, but as you continued going, like just that electric atmosphere and the sense that while there's thousands of people here and some of them might look big and scary, nobody is going to harm you. If anything, we're all protecting each other at the conventions.
It's so true.
How long did it take you to realize, oh my gosh, this is a safe space?
It was that very same day when I was in that room with hundreds of tattooed big guys that had tears coming down their cheeks and hugged me and said, if you ever need anything, we are here for you. I had two guys I got 2 cards from FBI guys who happen. There's a lot of people in law enforcement that are big horror fans. And I have a lot of their cards and some phone numbers on my speed dial now. When I tell you, I had no clue walking into that incredible, like you said, it seemed like thousands of people. It was around the block. It was freezing out and the lines were out the door and around the hotel and up the escalator or the stairs. I walked in and I said, what is going on here? Why are all these people here? The lady I happened to meet first is now my manager, which is hysterical, super fan, right? She goes, they're here for you.
Yeah.
And I said, get out. Because who knew back then? Like I said, Peter Brackey, who wrote the Crystal Lake Memories book, was the one who convinced me that I should plug into the convention, meet my fans, because I had 3 generations around the world who loved me. I went, Peter, you're insane. And he said, trust me on this, because he had actually dug to find me. I was still doing looping on the soundstage because I did not feel safe. Sometimes the psychological hurt is more than the physical hurt. It's because it doesn't go away very easily. And so, yes, it was that day that I had this connection. I knew that I would always have my fans in my heart. I appreciate them. It's hard for me to even refer to them as fans. I call them my campers. First, it was my happy campers, and I went way too much pressure because I know.
Right.
I know that every day is not happy. That's the days we have to fight through, and we are campers and we get through life together. Hopefully I'm still a camp counselor. I'm here for my campers, and I make myself available either at the shows or through social media. If somebody reaches out to me, I respond, because that one response can make a difference in someone's life.
Absolutely. I didn't know that much about your story before this chat. The horror community started you on your healing process 20 years ago.
Isn't that crazy? Not knowing that I needed it.
Right. Sometimes you don't. Until
I thought I was fine, I thought everything was hunky-dory, and I was moving quietly and still under surface, but I thought everything was hunky-dory until I realized, wow, does this feel better?
I love that.
And the sharing part is so good for healing. When people share with me, they heal, and it makes me heal.
What are some of the more interesting things fans have had you sign?
Oh, funny. Well, of course, the machete. When they realized that Alice was the first one and not Jason, right, to use the machete. It's so funny they have all the Jasons signed and it's like this little space for Alice. It's like, hello. Okay, my first Scare Fest in Kentucky. I signed Betsy Palmer, Kane, and I, at the request of a very pregnant lady, signed her belly. And then we met the little girl 4 years later.
Oh my goodness.
That's cute.
How cool is that?
Wow.
I love
Love that.
Lexington Scare Fest. It's a great show. Great people.
Well, we've got a giant machete signed by Ari. There's plenty of.
And he never had a machete in his hand. Let's make that clear.
What was it like starting to go back to the camp and have those experiences?
Wasn't that crazy, huh? Well, my manager, Stacy Lee, she was the first fan I bumped into, and she has literally become my best manager ever. She's just so reliable and knows every line of every movie that's ever been made. She's just terrific. She was instrumental in actually getting us on the campsite because up to that point, Boy Scouts did not embrace it. They tried to keep everybody from sneaking on. But what she finally got them to realize is it could be a win-win and that the fans would win and the Boy Scouts would make a heck of a lot of money. They caught on real quick.
Yeah, I bet.
Real quick. But I must tell you, everyone says it's worth every penny and it brings you right back to your childhood. It's fabulous. They know all my stories now, so they don't need me. But the fact of the matter is I usually get back there once a year. This year, it just didn't work out. It looks like it did when we filmed there. It's extraordinary. They've taken the money they've made and built what was supposed to be called Alice's Trading Post, but it's now just some other person's trading post. That's huge with all these things they sell. The campers aren't allowed to go into that trading post. I have a problem with that. They buy from outside. But the cool thing is I watched the movie some 40 years later on the beach with fans on a screen. And the last time I had been there, the 40 odd years before, when we actually shot, the last scene was the scene in the canoe. We didn't know when we left the camp whether we had a finished movie because it was film. We couldn't do video playback. The dailies, we had to get out of there, and the dailies, they didn't see to the next day. But boy, when they saw them, I knew they had it because 2 weeks later, I met them in Connecticut to shoot that pickup shot in the hospital. But I hadn't seen it. That was the third time. It took us 3 times to get it. It was 1 camera, then a 2 camera shot, then a 3 camera shot with a slow-mo camera. Over the course of the 7 weeks that we shot it, we'd have to close for Sean Cunningham to go ask his investors for more money so that we could get the more film and the more camera.
Yeah.
So as it went on, it was a colder situation. But when you are at the camp, you can actually take that photo with me on the beach where I'm hanging over the canoe. Yeah. And the fan can either join me in the canoe or jump from behind and pretend they're Jason. And we had the best time. And that was my dear manager, Stacy Lee. She comes up with the greatest ideas. And so that was one of them. I enjoy going back there because it makes me feel like I'm in my 20s again. However old you were when you first saw the movie, swoosh, there you are. It's time travel. It's remarkable. It's goosebump time for everyone. Because it's all right there. You can see everything. They really do a fabulous job preserving it. The Boy Scouts are wonderful. The leaders are great.
Good.
I love the fact that they were able to embrace the fans rather than chasing them off.
So many movies try to get that one last scare, that one last, gotcha. And that's got to be in like the top 3. That's so unexpected.
Well, Victor Miller admits he ripped it off from Carrie. So that, I'm guessing, is one of your top 3 too, right?
It's got to be.
Or was it Alien?
Gosh, I just had one in mind and it's vanished. Carrie definitely.
Carrie and the Alien, I think.
You know what it was? Don't Look Now.
Of course.
Donald Sutherland. That was the other one that I was trying to think of. What an iconic moment. And as a kid watching that for the first time, it's like, you've gone through the whole thing and like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, she just got decapitated and all that stuff. It's like, no way. Like,
It's also funner, the fan films that are coming out too. That's inspired a whole generation since we haven't been able to get any new films out of Friday the 13th. It's fun that the fans are filmmakers or filmmakers are fans. I'm actually going to Denver on Friday the 13th in September with the fan film.
Cool.
Yeah, with Jason Rising and then the director James Sweet and then Vinny DeSanti, who did Never Hike Alone. They're showing those two films, and Tom Matthews is going to be there. And I think Amy Steele is going to be there too. So it's very interesting how those jump scares obviously stayed with a lot of young, talented individuals who decided, I'm going to make a scare.
Yeah.
I'm going to, I want to achieve that and see if we can. So it's fun because I got a chance to kind of try to relive some of that insanity.
yes.
It's just amazing that 45 years or whatever we are now, close
Next year.
talking about it, and the jump scare still holds up,
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's something that I'm really appreciating now, because I think it was done sort of gimmicky a few years back, but now it's like there's a movie in the theaters this week called Stream that features a lot of iconic horror actors. It's not done as a gimmick. People want to see their horror celebrities back on the big screen. These are fantastic, Jeffrey Combs and
right.
Dee Wallace and Danielle Harrison's like,
grew up with these people, it's like you guys grew
Yep.
up with these people. How much fun is it to resurrect them and resurrect their careers? I almost got to do it. I had the first 4 scripts for Crystal Lake from Brian Fuller of Hannibal fame. I was going to be directed by Kevin Williamson. Talk about being resurrected from the dead for a worthy cause, A24 broke up with Brian Fuller's creative team, which is such a shame. And they have a new creative team. I have no clue what's going on, but I figure my fans are going to want some bit of whatever.
absolutely, yeah. It's
to bring back their childhood.
great.
It's magic of it.
I'm sending out the good vibes right now just because I know they just announced a few days ago this new creative team. The project is, getting back on track. And so I hope they don't forget that people were so excited to see your name attached to that project.
It's easy to forget.
Yeah.
Well,
It's the nature of the beast. I'm not in LA. I live in Oregon. The agent I had, the agency in New York, my theatrical agent for a very long time, since The Stalker, was gotta love, didn't make it through the pandemic because all of their actors were on Broadway. So when Broadway closed down, I didn't even bother looking for an agent because it's like, what for? And then out of the blue, Crystal Lake comes up. And of course, Brian Fuller is a personal friend. So that's how that happened, because he was a fanboy first. He, like you guys, grew up on the original. So it's not going to break my heart. It's just, it would be fun. That's all. It would be fun.
the fans would love it too. That's the thing. Fans are very persuasive these days.
Fans don't realize how much power they have. I don't.
Right. Wow. We hope you come back next week and listen to the second part of Adrienne King's episode, and you'll find out who her favorite final person is. But I don't think I'm giving too much away when I mention that Alice is Kendall's favorite final person from a horror movie.
She is.
Why is that? What is it about Alice?
We've already talked about the fact that The Exorcist I saw very young, and I don't know if I identified Reagan as a final person, but I definitely identified Adrienne King's character, Alice, as a final person at the end of Friday the 13th. And maybe because of my age at the time that I saw it, it just had a really big impact on me, the film in general, and that final scene, which is fantastic. I just always looked up to Adrienne's character ever since that moment. I don't know if that can be replaced because of the time and place where I was in my life when I watched it.
I'm just glad that Adrienne was willing to talk to us, even though I occasionally do cosplay as Pamela Voorhees.
Killer mommy! Killer mommy!
Thank you, Adrienne, for hanging in there for this. Please don't cut my head off with a machete. One more quick thing on the original Friday the 13th. Kendall and I watch probably 3 or 4 horror movies per week. And occasionally, as we're making dinner together, Kendall will say, hey, let's watch an old classic. I would say at least 4 or 5 times a year. He's like, how about the original Friday the 13th? We have probably watched that movie together, well, at least 13 times. It never gets old. It holds up. We would love for you guys to tune in and listen to part 2 with Adrienne King next week. Thanks for joining us.